Hello friends, so we are covering chapter 4, Experience, Space and Justice, and it is part 8. Foregrounding nation is space. The idea of temples in Hindu cultural imagination offer a defining condition for India as a nation. This is demonstrated in the idea of the Char Dhamas, four Hindu pilgrimage center that completes the religious and cultural imagination of Hindu India. Nehru's use of metaphor of temple for the contemporary project that represent typify secular and modern India is well known. How do Gandhi and Ambedkar name India? Or what is their idea of India? The two of them differ in their approach to this issue. Gandhi imagine India as a Ram Rajya and Ambedkar name its Bahishkrut Bharat. Ambedkar, however, moved from Bahishkrut to Prabuddha Bharat. Subsequently, the two of them follow different spatial trajectory for their respective conceptual production of India. Gandhi produces his India primarily by identifying with the experience of Daridra Narayan, the peasant, and mobilizing the latter for producing historical conjecture through the mass mobilization against the British rule. Thus, one can notice the shift in his adversaries. In the local configuration of power, his adversaries are the upper caste Hindus, both men and women. But in the colonial configuration of power for Gandhi, it is the British rule in India. Ambedkar, on the other hand, remained consistent in terms of locating the adversary primarily in the local configuration, not that he makes a concession to the British state of power. For Ambedkar, this configuration is important because, unlike the colonial, it truly through tightly organized spaces produces convergent experiences combining untouchable and his master's social experiences across time and space. Here, space is taken in its territorial sense. As a result, Ambedkar opens up primarily in the social imagination of India, a Bahishkrut Bharat, the India of the ostracized. Ambedkar is forced to imagine India in a language that may sound quite negative to many. This imagination would not fit into the framework of Benedict Anderson. The imagination of nation is trigger of in universal condition that need also to be the dominant condition at the same time. For example, the successful imagination of nation is based on the uniformity of social and cultural condition. In territory where such conditions do not exist, they need to be created by deploying subjective resources such as ideology. For example, ideology for nation do not become articulable on their own. They also require space as the necessity condition for their articulation. For spaces provide a necessary background condition for the comprehensible representation of ideologue and their ideas. Along with expansion of social space, there is also the expansion of conceptual space, entailing the transformation of a particular person into an universal idea. For example, Gandhi, through a favorable social space such as the public Maidan, ceases to be a Baniya, tradition caste, or a Gujarati and become a Mahatma. For majority of the people residing in India, Gandhi feels encouraged to take voyage and concretize his imagination of India through the voyage because he finds sociological similarity to be the most favorable condition for imagining India. He discovers sociological similarity in the village system with peasantry as the core of this system. In order to share the experience of peasantry, he symbolically, through his biopolitics, transforms himself into peasant by putting on a peasant attire. In order to discover similarity in experience and share it for pedagogical purpose, Gandhi undertook extensive travel before he launches his project of producing Village India. What he discovered through the voyage are not just the spiritual boundary, but the most importantly, the sameness in the experience of the peasantry. This experience of exploitation which the peasantry gained primarily from colonial states, constitute the major sources for the Gandhian imagination of India. It is due to this given historical situation that it became easy for Gandhi to occupy the center spaces that he uses so tactfully for the political mobilization of the Indian masses, basically the Indian peasantry. Thus, he could easily use the centrally located open space in Kanpur in the United Province to organize a rally. Or he could and be best the guest of Rohtagi, a well-known upper-caste personality of Kanpur. This example could be multiplied into a huge number, depending on the Gandhian voyage across several regions of early 20th century India. Thanks to the British Railways that made the Gandhian voyage possible. It is therefore no wonder that Gandhi does not discover India as a Bahishkrut, because his voyage makes him open up in kind of sameness where he by and large find himself in the midst of peasantry but residing with the family of the feudal lords and the emergent industrialist. Occasionally, as politics demanded, he also stayed for a brief while in the hunt of scavenger. Gandhi thus had a choice to transgress spaces vertically. Ambedkar did not have this choice. He and his social constituency open up only horizontally, moving from one Dalitwada to another across the region. Thus, when he went to Kanpur, he stayed with a person of his caste, Sonkar, and addressed the assembly of the untouchable only in the untouchable locality. His voyage across the country landed him in a different Dalit colonies in Kanpur and Agra in north and Belgaum and Kolhar in south. It is this discovery of sameness, his and his people in experience, sustained by spaces, that leads Ambedkar to imagine India differently. This mode of imagining India is further accentuated in the context where Hindu public spaces such as Sarai public dormitory were close to the untouchables, as noted by Pandita Ramabai through her voyage of India, covering more than 4,000 kilometers travel in the 19th century, such spaces did not entertain lower caste people. It is due to this restriction on the untouchables from central India that a Dalit leader had to bring to the Legislative Council the issue of liberating such sarai from upper caste restrictions. Ambedkar criticized the notion of Dharmashala Sarai because it is very much hostile and humiliating for untouchable pilgrims going to Pandharpur in Maharashtra. Thus, it is very likely that the discriminatory nature of the Sarai discouraged untouchable from taking all India voyage, requiring them to pierce through the rigid Hindu public sphere. The All India voyage could become a possibility for Dalit mainly through the military route, either of local rulers or the British army. Dalit could not have imagined India into a Char Dham as the Adi Shankaracharya did. It is the significant to note that the early Dalit leadership, at least in Maharashtra, emerges from the military sphere. It is the arrival of British Railway that make it possible for Dalit and for Ambedkar to undertake all India travel. Through this voyage, Ambedkar finds similarity in experience. It is also through this convergence of experience that Ambedkar privileges self-respect and social justice over self-rule and over the idea of incredible India of Gandhi, Patel and Nehru. Care was taken by the Prakash leader and social elite to see that Ambedkar did not transgress the social spaces whenever they had to play host to him. For example, four-wheeler helped to deflate the intention of Judge based in Dhule, a district in Maharashtra and an important center of colonial state activities in the early 20th century. And perhaps his wife intention of humiliating Ambedkar as an untouchable. These judges found it difficult to invite Ambedkar to his Pathashala, a Sanskrit school. Thus, he decided to converse with Ambedkar in a moving car. The cost of the fuel that was being burned in the process was much less than the social cost that the judge would have suffered if he had taken Ambedkar home. Those upper caste individuals who showed this courage and took Ambedkar home had to pay a larger social cost. This included men like Panvalkar of Panvel near Bombay. The domestic was very safely guarded, this time not by the Prakash male but by the Prakash woman. This was clear from the predicament of no other than Ambedkar's own teacher. His teacher wanted to invite Ambedkar to his place but could not do so, fearing possible opposition from his wife. Such kind of containment at Baroda and Daulatabad forced Ambedkar either to take shelter in Dalitwada or in a government bungalow whenever he was on a government assignment. Modernization and the colonial policy of creating dark bungalows saved Ambedkar from crushing humiliation and the Suprakash host from complete ostracism. It is this experience that led Ambedkar to prioritize idea of self-respect and social justice over self-rule. This language of dignity and self-respect survived and remained relevant after the emergence of nation. And yet such ideas do not become dominant. Why? This is because these ideas are ontologically related to the social existence of vast number of people. Most problems acquire only the rhetorical and not the regular attention of social elite, who are the ruling class of India. In the case of Ambedkar, conceptual space discursively collided with the social space. Experience sought to regulate the overlap. Unlike other categories, social justice and self-respect in the Prakash imagination remain bracketed within the ignored social condition of the Dalits. It is very ironic that Dalits then are condemned for being obsessed with a narrow identity politics for which they are not responsible but for which they are constantly pushed into by the state on the one hand and the upper caste intellectual on the other. Within the moral framework, it is not unfair to blame Dalit for parochialism when those who sit in judgment are also responsible for creating and sustaining the link between their ideas and his her identity. 107, 106. Surba Tipnis and Panvalkar from Panvel had to face social boycott from the Brahmins community on account of their being hostile to Ambedkar. Sridhar Balwanta Tilak, son of Biji Tilak, had to suffer the wrath of section of Orthodox Brahmin from Pune. 109. Ambedkar, along with his colleague, was humiliated by security guard at the Daulatabad fort, which is on the way to the world-famous Ellora Buddhist cave near Aurangabad in Maharashtra. Thank you. Chapter 4 is completed.